Welcome back to my Halloween month reviews. We've covered a lot of films so far, and with this one, I don't know if you guys were expecting me to review this one, because it is a Wizard of Oz film, but I think this is a perfect time to review this film for this year, and the film I'm talking about is Return to Oz, directed by Walter Murch, and is the unofficial sequel to the original Wizard of Oz film with Judy Garland. In this film, Dorothy Gale, played by young Faruza Balk, has already experienced everything about Oz in her life. She's already met the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. She's already fought off the witch and melted her with water, and she's already met the wizard herself. But when she does come back to Oz, she sees that Oz is not the same as it was when she left it the first time. Oz is deserted, the yellow brick road is destroyed, the Emerald City is in ruins, and everyone around Oz, including the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man, have turned to stone, and the Scarecrow is missing. And all of that is done from the main villain of the film, the Gnome King, played by Nicol Williamson, and both Dorothy and a new group of friends that she runs into have to find the Gnome King and restore Oz. The original Wizard of Oz film from 1939. That is such a classic to this day. It's got fun characters, memorable songs, and it's still a lot of fun to watch for families and kids. But with this film, it strips a lot of that for this story, which means no songs, no witches, and no wizard himself. This is a very dark and creepy movie. I remember getting the DVD when I was little, and I was curious to see a different take on the Wizard of Oz story because I did love the original film as a kid, and I wanted to see what they could do with something different with this story. And this is definitely a Wizard of Oz film that is completely different. And it's the kind of different where I watched it as a little kid and it scared the crap out of me to the point where I thought to myself, am I allowed to watch this film? And that's the kind of thing that should tell you that this is nothing like the original film. It's pretty much its own thing because it has some things that you wouldn't see in today's time, like people turning into sand when they go on the deadly desert, gnome monsters, and creepy guys on wheels. And like I said earlier, this is an unofficial sequel to the original film where it's kinda connected, but it's really not, because there are moments that are addressed in this film that were never mentioned in the original film, like the deadly desert, or the Tin Man cutting off parts of his body and replacing them with tin. And of course, we've had a lot of versions of the Wizard of Oz, whether they were connected to the original film or not. Like, we've had the prequel Wizard of Oz film with James Franco, and of course this film, which in my opinion, Wizard of Oz might be the best Wizard of Oz film that is not the original, of course. It takes itself very seriously, it has a lot of serious and dark moments, and makes you concerned for Dorothy on what she's going through. And I'm pretty sure when this movie came out in 1985, I'm sure that a lot of kids saw this film getting excited for a new Wizard of Oz film, but not realizing that this is way more dark than the original film. But when this film first came out, both families and critics did not like this film at all because it was way too dark compared to the original film, because they only want to see like fun and colorful, vibrant backgrounds and fun characters just like the original film had, and they wanted this film to be the same as the original, when it's really not, which I actually think that that's a good thing about Return to Oz. It's the oddball film in the Wizard of Oz films, at least the ones that I've seen. And of course, throughout the years, people have grown to like Return to Oz, and some would even say that they love Return to Oz, and say that it's a very underrated Disney film, and I'm one of those people. This film takes place 6 months after Dorothy returns from Oz and after her first house gets taken by a tornado with her inside it and takes her to Oz. But when she gets home from Oz, not only can she not stop thinking about Oz, but she also can't sleep because of that, which gets both of her aunt and uncle very concerned about her. And we all know that the world of Oz Oz is a parallel world where she meets characters that look similar to the people in her world, but are different in the world of Oz, but are also played by the same actors. Like the Doctor in this film is played by Nicol Williamson, who also plays the Gnome King in the rest of the film. And Aunt M decides to take Dorothy to this hospital where, so they say, can turn her back to normal, where she won't have any of those dreams anymore and she won't think of Oz, but they're doing that by giving her shock therapy. Yeah, freaking shock therapy. Like, that's what they're thinking of using for Dorothy to try to help her not think about Oz. And all of that sounds nothing like the original film. None of it sounds like it came from that film, and that's really because that this film is trying to be faithful to the original Wizard of Oz books by L. Frank Baum, where if you read the books that this movie is based on, like The Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz, I mean, those books are dark as hell. Let's talk about Faruza Balk as Dorothy Gale. This is one of her earlier films before she was in films like The Craft, and I do think she was good as Dorothy in this film, although there are times where she can be a little monotone in some scenes, but she still does a good job here. And I do think she was the right age for this film, because when you look at Judy Garland's Dorothy Gale from the original film, she is great as the character, but you can see that she's already a full-grown adult instead of a little girl. Here, they made a good choice with casting a little girl to play Dorothy in this film, because she's a little girl in the books, which no disrespect to Judy Garland, she is great as the character, it's just that I think they made the right choice of making Dorothy a little girl in this film. Now let's talk about the practical effects in this film. They are some of the best practical effects in the whole movie, especially with some of the new characters that they have, like with TikTok, Jack Pumpkinhead, and the Gump, who are obviously replacements for the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, where you have characters like TikTok, who is a robot that is also a soldier that was supposed to protect Oz before everything went down. And of course, he does protect Dorothy from some of the Wheelers and some of the other obstacles they get themselves stuck in, which let's briefly talk about the Wheelers for a second. They are some of the creepiest side villains I have ever seen in a kid's film, where they just use their screeching wheels for their hands and feet, and they have helmets with creepy faces on them, and they make screeching sounds everywhere they go. But now I got the Wheelers out of the way, let's get back to talking about some of these characters. There's Jack Pumpkinhead, who is obviously a guy in a suit, but there are also times where they use animatronics for his head. When he makes expressions, it would sometimes stretch out, and there are times where they would use puppets for him. And they also had the Gump, where they had some animatronics and of course a puppet for when his head moves. And side point, back when I was a kid and I would get pumpkins from a pumpkin patch for Halloween, I used to get like big pumpkins that look like Jack's head from this film, and I would carve my pumpkin to make it look like Jack's face from Return to Oz, and that is for me one of the fond memories I've had because of this film. And they would also use some stop motion for the gnome monsters and the Gnome King, which would appear often throughout the film, and all of that looks really great. That still holds up very well, and it's something that they used way before CGI took over. And all that especially looks great when you look at the Gnome King. He looks cool and creepy at the same time whenever he's angry about something, and the Gnome King is a pretty intimidating villain. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but what the Gnome King does later in the film makes him a very interesting and pretty threatening villain. And Nicol Williamson does a great job as the Gnome King, rest in peace. Now, I already covered the Gnome King and the Wheelers being creepy villains in the film and pretty intimidating, but the one villain in this film that I actually think is even more creepy and terrifying is Princess Mombi, played by Jean Marsh, who also played the nurse in the beginning of this film, and she does a great job as both of these characters, in particular Mombi. She collects heads of women that are in her chamber, and she likes to change one head to a different head for herself, and all of those heads look at Dorothy when she first sees them. Well, that's not creepy at all. Which, no spoilers, of course, but that leads to a scene later in the film where Dorothy is trying to get this object from Mombi. When that scene happens, that gives me chills every time, and it creeps me out every time I see that freaking scene. And if you've seen this movie, then you already know which scene I'm talking about. But in case if you don't know, it does relate to one red key. That's all I'll say there. So with all the stuff that I said about this film throughout this video, it is nightmare fuel. It may look like a fun, family-friendly movie just by looking at the posters, but in my mind, if it has shock therapy, wheelers, deadly desert, gnome monsters, and a woman collecting heads, it's a horror movie. And despite the fact that this film is PG, this is another one of those kids films from the 80s that got away with some pretty dark stuff, and Disney used to do a lot of dark stuff for some of their earlier films, whether they were animated or live action. Like they would have some dark stuff in their earlier animated films like Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia, or Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, or in some of their live action films like Something Wicked This Way Comes. And this movie definitely fits into some of the dark Disney stuff, which Disney would never do in today's time. They just wouldn't. Now, since we're looking at a film from the 80s, I am unfortunately going to talk about the stuff that doesn't hold up anymore, like the green screen. Whenever Dorothy is walking around with a character that's not human, or when she's just around Oz, you can really tell that it's green screen and it doesn't hold up anymore. And unfortunately, this movie uses a lot of it. It doesn't ruin the experience at all, but it's really one of those issues where you couldn't help but notice that that green screen really doesn't look that good. And another issue that I know I've already covered, that this movie can be creepy on purpose as well, but there are also some designs for some of the characters like the Scarecrow that do look unintentionally creepy. Like, I know they're supposed to be like accurate to how they look in the books, but when you try to translate it into live action, it does not look very good. So I will admit there are some designs for some of these characters that don't look that great, but for the most part, they all look really good. It's just that there are some that either look not that great or unintentionally creepy. Return to Oz is still a great film to watch to this day. Yeah, there are some designs that are unintentionally creepy, and some of the green screen doesn't really hold up anymore, but it still has an engaging story, fun characters, good acting, really good practical effects for the most part, really good stop motion, great sets, as well as a very good soundtrack. I do recommend giving this film a watch if you haven't yet. Yes, it's very dark, it's different, and it's nothing like the original film, but it's still a great watch, and it's better than what people originally said back when it first came out. And if you do ever decide to watch the film, it is on Disney Plus, so you can watch it there. I'm gonna give Return to Oz a B+. So guys, if you have seen Return to Oz, what do you think about it? Do you think it's a great film and maybe as good as the original film? Or do you think this movie is way too terrifying for kids to watch and you don't like it overall? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you haven't yet, please watch my parts 1 and 2 videos of the top 10 underrated horror movies videos. And I also had fun making both of those videos and had fun picking some of the films for that list. And if you haven't seen those videos yet, I will leave a link for both of those in the description below. And as always, if you like this video and my Halloween month reviews, then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.